Everyone's all about AI adoption. It's adopted here, because it has a lot of uses, especially around generative AI and specifically under generative AI, LLMs. AI chatbots, ChatGPT, Gemini, GitHub Copilot, I'm a huge fan of. Just the ability to speed up your productivity is something that we haven't seen from a tool like this ever. But it's not so much the adoption, like why it's so valuable for certain use cases. You got to understand what are the potential security issues, the downfall. And for that, I want to jump into this wonderful Google Deepmind paper called Generative AI Misuse, a taxonomy of tactics and insights from real world data. You got to know how to protect yourself, because the last thing you want to do is put yourself in a position where you're going to have issues, right? Because ultimately, the use of a chatbot, you're not going to blame like a chat GPT for the information that you use coming out of it. There's terms of use. There's what's called click wrap agreements. When you agree to the terms of use, it reduces their liability, and there's no negotiation in those types of agreements, because in the best interest of the public, you want the ability to click I agree and use the tool. So they can be shielded to a certain extent from liability when you're using the information. You got to be cautious. So what are the issues? I want to quickly jump before I go into that study and just show from this McKinsey report on the state of generative AI, came out earlier this year, that a lot of companies, they see the issues, the reasons they may not be adopting it as fast or within different facets of their business. Number one, inaccuracy. Like I said, you just can't rely upon these things for 100% truth. You got to verify. It's a search engine on steroids, but you just don't know when it's hallucinating or providing misinformation. Cybersecurity issues, regulatory compliance, equity and fairness, intellectual property infringement, major one, especially around the generative AI models that give you video and images. Organizational reputation, environmental impacts, a big deal around the power utilization around this stuff. So what can happen? The misuse of putting a generative AI model out there on behalf of yourself for personal use or for business. Now, I'm not going to go into the entirety of this 29-page document, which, if you are someone within this space and you're adopting it, highly implore you to read every word of this. But they've got these nice little tables, and really it comes down to two areas of the misuse of generative AI. One is the exploitation of generative AI capabilities, and the other one is the compromise of the generative AI systems themselves, the models. How can they be manipulated into doing things that they shouldn't be doing? And we're just going to look at specifically this. So the misuse of generative AI, a impersonation, appropriate likeness, sock puppeting. That's something I've never heard that term until I was reading through this, but it makes sense. Creating synthetic online personas or accounts of other people. You're creating a puppet. Non-consensual intimate imagery. Not even going to go there. Realistic depictions of non-humans, falsification, IP infringement, like we talked about, counterfeit, use of generated content, scaling and amplification, targeting and personalization. And the IP infringement, I think, is one that is hitting everybody in the face. Things like the GPT model are training itself on anything and everything out there. They have publicly said that if it is publicly available, quote, without really going in depth on what does publicly available mean, like if it's on some sort of platform, like are they training on Google and YouTube videos, technically not necessarily in the public domain, that you then, when you trying to produce things, you get an Italian plumber that goes through pipes, you're ultimately going to be liable for it. So the one that scares me the most when putting some of these systems out there is the compromise of generative AI systems. Adversarial inputs involves modifying individual input data to cause a model to malfunction, Prompt injections are a form of adversarial input that involve manipulating the text instructions given to the AI system. Jailbreaking aims to bypass or remove restrictions and safety filters placed on generative AI model completely. Model diversion takes model manipulation one step further by repurposing the model, and it diverts from its original intended functionality. Here's another really nice and concise breakdown of all the different ways that it can be manipulated. There's privacy compromise, data exfiltration, model extraction. If someone has some sort of proprietary model in place, the ability to figure out how the model is training the data, and it also involves obtaining the architecture, the parameters, the hyperparameter tuning, that can be a moneymaker for a lot of different people that are putting these models out there, because the ability to improve things like accuracy, reduce false positives or false negatives. But if someone get in there and figure out a way to extract that, then you're going to have some issues. There are these different databases that document actively, or as much as they can, what is going on with the misuse of different generative AI models. Here we go. This is the AI incident database. Scammers use deepfake of Hong Kong entertainer Andy Lau to steal 2.64 million from fan. Wow. Here's another one. The AI algorithms and automation repository. A whole bunch of news, like there was a whole bunch around Perplexity, ignores requests not to scrape websites, AI accused of ripping off news websites, top chatbots spread Russian misinformation. And then there's one more here, the OECD.ai Policy Observatory, policies data analysis for trustworthy artificial intelligence. And each one of these does a really good job of at least making aware. Now, it's not all doomsday. Like, there are, yes, Data Privacy Week, companies are banning generative AI due to privacy risks. When you're using like a public GPT, you put something in there because you want to get use out of it in some context. Then all of a sudden OpenAI has that data and they can train itself on it. Yeah, there's a little button that you can click that says, hey, don't train it using this data. But are we 100% sure they're doing that? We don't know. So National Law Review, they've got different, and I gotta say, going to the National Law Review for some sort of technology advice, the use of generative AI, probably not. And I'm speaking as a former lawyer. Like, there's a bunch of information out here, but they're not kind of going that next layer of understanding how these models work to give real context, how to reduce and mitigate data leakage. But it's actually not bad in this case, aligning generative AI with applicable laws, making sure there's compliance, categorizing different types of generative AI content with associated data privacy risks. So they're looking at more an overarching compliance, trying to navigate like an organization, making sure that they aren't. Like, especially in the financial services, you have PII, personal identifying information, or in the healthcare life sciences side, you've got HIPAA compliance, where you absolutely cannot leak private information of patients. So it's not all doomsday that these are what these models do. It's all about training, identifying use cases, even to the point where a lot of companies are narrowing down. They're not using these massive general purpose large language models. They're getting really niche in the ability to deliver value. And not only is it getting trained to be more specific, which makes it therefore more useful, but also it reduces risks of the data leakage of generalized information that for some reason it's trained on and just doesn't need. So that's a way that people are reducing and mitigating risk. There's a variety of others. Each one's pretty much custom on the use of these generative AI, different. I should really specify specifically we're talking about LLMs, because in the world of generative AI, there's other things like general adversarial networks, for example, that is within that umbrella. So specifically for the purpose of this, we're really talking about LLMs. So just understand when you're using these, incredible value, but understand the risk. That way you can put policies in place to make sure that you are not putting anything that you're doing at risk.